Minecraft has had pretty consistent updates ever since its development began in mid-2009. And over the span of a decade, the game has changed drastically. Starting as a bare-bones sandbox with just a few blocks you could build with, Minecraft has become the single largest game on nearly all platforms, dominating YouTube and Twitch, as well as being known by billions of people. With this size, the fanbase is appropriately huge. All of the people who play this game have different views, and often feel quite strongly about said views. And while this means many things, for our purposes, we'll just be looking at how people argue over their favorite versions of the game. So in today's video, we'll be comparing modern Minecraft versus the old pre-release updates. While the majority of people use the current version of Minecraft, it's pretty well known that the Java PvPers use the 1.8 release version to fight. But for this video, the cutoff between old and new Minecraft will be the Adventure Update. It was 2 updates between Beta 1.8 and Release 1.0, all the way back in late 2011. I wouldn't have enough time to go over every change, but it drastically shifted the direction of the game more than any update had or ever has. It added hunger, sprinting, a boss fight, radically different world generation, added new biomes, and removed old biomes. Basically, it completely shifted the dynamic of the game, and while some people were very excited, others were upset with the changes. Old worlds were corrupted, the spawn location was often surrounded by a mega ocean, hundreds of thousands of blocks wide, and the game was very glitchy, with lots of lighting bugs as well as a lackluster boss fight. Some people refused to update, while others would come back to the beta versions, or even try it out for the first time, especially during the long absences between updates during 2014 through 2016. But to get an understanding of why people care so much about these decade-old versions of the game, we'll be comparing the gameplay, design, and purpose of playing, more so than differences between blocks, mobs, items, and stuff like that. I will also bring up some similarities, because at the end of the day, it's all about mining and crafting. Please stay civil in the comment section, and remember to leave a like and subscribe. The addition of a literal end to the game saw a major shift in how you progress through the world. Nowadays, there is a well-defined early, middle, and late game, with plenty of what are essentially side quests in your journey. While you don't technically need to ever kill the Ender Dragon or go to the Nether, the in-game benefits of doing so are too good to ignore. Those who play the pre-release versions of the game often feel that the original point of Minecraft was to not have any point. There's no clearly defined early or late game, and you choose how far you get in the Minecraft world, whether that be after a few hours or a few years. Technically, this is the same case in newer versions, but the lack of a pre-existing goal is what launched Minecraft's popularity in the first place. Minecraft is known for the infinite possibilities and endless creativity capable, but the way in which creativity was supported differs between versions. Modern patches of the game aim to give players as many blocks as possible in order for builders to have many more choices when building. Before the Adventure Update, oak was the only wood type you could craft into planks. Stone variations are minimal, and there are very few decorational blocks. A lot of people believe that creativity is better expressed by restricting yourself. Blumhouse Productions is well known for some of the best horror movies in the last decade, and part of the reason why is because the budgets for the movies are kept to a minimum. Instead of using CGI for everything, directors often need to take advantage of practical effects and tricks with cameras. People still made crazy things in the alpha and beta versions of the game, and it often feels more impressive. Making a house look nice when you have very limited resources can force your mind to come up with creative solutions. Minecraft Java is very polished nowadays. A decade of bug fixes and clearing out tangled out code has made the game very smooth, even if it's sometimes been to the detriment of mod and plugin developers. All the way back in its earliest stages, Minecraft was a jerry-rigged jumble of code, mostly because Notch didn't really expect the game to take off the way it did. While to many this may make the old updates annoying to play, I've often heard players mention that they actually enjoy the rough nature of the game. With all the bugs and untested features, players found genius ways to exploit what some would consider issues, to make storage or transportation systems, as well as building quirks. This is a pretty common thing to see in early access games, and while some were disappointed with Mojang removing these player-found features, it's understandable to me, at least, that a developer would like their game to be as polished as possible. The surface feel of a game can make a massive difference in how people see it. And for this section, I'm going to use some fancy artistic terms, so I'll do my best to explain them. Trust me, I passed art history, I think. Since around 2014, 2015, Mojang and Microsoft have been shifting the game to have a very modern style, Just go to the website or game launcher, and you'll find lots of smooth animations, sharp edges, and solid colors. Promotional material for the game shows this as well. The style translates to the game itself. The texture update in 1.14, while controversial, standardized the textures for 10 years worth of thousands of blocks, items, and skins in this update. There's clearly an effort to make the game seem more refined and smooth. Notch had very different feelings, and before 2014, Minecraft's identity was around the passion for games of the past. And while that is still the case, it was even more pronounced back then. If you've ever wondered why you get nostalgic for beta or alpha versions even if you haven't played them, that's probably the reason. The word I can best use to describe the style of old Minecraft is rustic. The warm, fuzzy brown colors of the endless dirt background on the old website, launcher, and title screen is a stark contrast to the bright and sleek modern look they have now. The older versions are literally darker, and I feel like for many people this brings back old childhood memories, when things were simpler, so to say. With the majority of Generation Alpha growing up on phones, tablets, and computers, with the current ultra-modern aesthetic every company seems to be going for now, I do wonder if in 10 or 20 years, the youngest Minecraftians now won't be able to relate to the old style, or if they'll even feel nostalgic for the current style. It's something interesting to think about anyways. A major point you'll see older players make is that what made Minecraft great in the first place was the simplicity. Even though there was no tutorial, the bare basics were easy enough to understand, not to mention the game spread by word of mouth, and many people first started playing after watching a Let's Play, where they'd figure out what to do anyways. It's not like there's all that much to learn in the first place. The game was so new that even basic methods like strip mining hadn't been figured out yet. Plus, including the aforementioned limited blocks and lack of progression system, the game was pretty clearly simple in nature. Minecraft nowadays is still easy to get into, but once you're a few hours into the game, things kinda get complicated. Over the years, people make increasingly complex strategies to optimize everything, from building bridges for Bed Wars to making literal computers in the game. Finally, I thought I'd end the differences at the first thing pretty much any Golden Age Minecraft redditor will bring up: the world generation. Now, due to 1.18 completely removing biome variations, the way current Minecraft worlds generate will be changing very soon. But how it is now, and how it's been since the adventure update, is that biomes are incredibly rigid, with height, eccentricity, and flatness, almost completely controlled by biomes and biome variations. This inevitably leads to a very predictable and boring environment, and has been heavily criticized for years. Before the adventure update, biomes mostly just decided the color of grass and chance of rain. The height map was independent and very random, but without being too eccentric. This leads to worlds often being either hit or miss, but once you find the right seed, the generation can be quite stunning. Every time you start a new world, it feels completely unique from every other one. Before Alpha 1.2, there wasn't even any biomes, and yet generations still looked beautiful much of the time. I know some people like the current generation, but as unbiased as I try to be, the old generation was really something else. Also, I wanted to bring on someone who has spent much more time on the older versions than me, so I've asked fellow YouTuber Jyration to help me with this video, and answer some questions that I had for him. Please remember that what he says is completely his opinion, and there are no wrong answers. Why do you think older versions of the game are better compared to newer versions?
The first thing I would probably say would be, number one, it's kind of simple and limited. So it isn't too overwhelming because there's not a lot in the game in the first place. And there also isn't any certain goal that needs to be accomplished. And I actually kind of prefer that. The second thing I would say is difficulty. I personally find that the game is much more difficult. The mobs just seem to be that they hit harder. And maybe that's because there's no regeneration of health. So it's a lot different in the fact that you can get hit by a zombie only a few times and you can already be down quite low. So yeah, mobs are harder, nights are darker, and armor is not as good either. And then I would also say bugs and quirks. There's always some interesting things you can do with that, which is lots of fun.
So for question number 2, before the adventure update, Minecraft didn't really have a clear goal, like the Ender Dragon or boss fight, or anything like that. Does the lack of almost any progression mechanics make the pre-release version of the game better? And you did already say that it made the game better.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of like it that it's a bit more vague, that there's not really anything that you specifically have to do. And I can see why some people might not prefer that. I know a lot of people, even playing early versions, might consider diamonds to be kind of like the thing. Even in modern releases, diamonds is kind of a milestone to reach. But it also forces a lot of player creativity, and the player kind of has to generate all the lore themselves because there's no Ender Dragon, so there's nothing really to suspect, which is what you saw a lot of in early versions, like Hero Brian and stuff like that. There's always different lore going around.
So question number 3, do you prefer the clunky nature of Alpha in terms of gameplay?
Yeah, I kind of like the unroundedness of alpha, like even just the fact that weird things like breaking crafting tables and furnaces just take longer than they should, like just weird things like that. It just makes it different and unique. You saw a lot of like just weird things as well with bugs, like minecart boosters and stuff. That wasn't really intended, but players found uh, different things that just worked, and they used it to their advantage. And they found all these different things that maybe it didn't make your, maybe it didn't automate the process of doing things, but it just made things easier almost, or almost inventions that you didn't need, but they kind of helped a little bit. I don't know.
Question number 5, why do you think newer versions of the game are worse compared to older versions?
I've said this a couple times that I'm not much for the newer versions, and I think that's mostly because of the fact that there's so much in the game now. There's so many blocks, and for me, I find I have a hard time being creative when I have so much in front of me. Like it's like going into, I don't know, like a store where you have to build something and literally everything you can imagine is there. To some people that's amazing, but to other people it's like I don't even know where to begin, right? But for me, I find I work better when I'm under a bit of restriction, where you can kind of just, you have to be creative in how you use certain items and such. And that's more of a personal preference, I think.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
That didn't take too long. With all the talk about differences between modern and old Minecraft, we need to remember they both come together to make up the game as a whole. Without the pre-release versions, there would have never been a Minecraft in the first place. And if the game stopped changing after beta 1.7.3, Minecraft would have eventually fallen into obscurity, never becoming the best-selling and most influential game of all time. There's 3 major similarities both the old and new share that make the game so great. Notch and Mojang have both been very open to the community, and we get a major say in the direction of the game. It's not rare to see people's own mods get implemented into the vanilla game. Updates like Caves and Cliffs were also made because of how heavily they were asked for by the community. It's also a game that anyone can play and enjoy, regardless of your individual, physical, or mental characteristics, even if Notch has been not necessarily inclusive after selling Mojang. Thirdly, it's very easy to get sucked into Minecraft, often at a young age, and before you realize it, you've grown up, looking back at that dumb old game from 2009 and how it significantly impacted your childhood. One of those things that made the hard times easier and the good times even better. I, of course, have my own opinions on the individual updates and versions of Minecraft, but I always try to see both sides. I feel like both the newest versions of Minecraft as well as the oldest and everything in between make up a truly amazing game. Each update has its good and bad, except for 1.10. Literally the worst update ever. Absolute garbage. I could make a 30-minute rant video on why it's so terrible.